Hi, and welcome to this somewhat controversial class. Before we continue, before we dive into the juicy bits, I would like to briefly mention a few things about myself and also perhaps reasons why I've decided to make such a class in the first place. So I've been doing 3D for more than 20 years, I would say 23 or something like this, but more than 10 of that would be professional work. And in my experience, I've worked in such companies as Platige Image, I worked for Ninja Theory, I've worked for Blur Studios in Los Angeles, I've worked for Prime Studio One, that's the Japanese collectible studio, and many others. Some of them are related to film and video games, others are not. So some fashion projects, some advertisement projects, things of this nature. But what I've found out is that I do have some strengths or things that I do better than others, and among those things, or I guess maybe all of them, is definitely organic sculpting. So I'm a 3D character artist, so that would be number one, right? ZBrush sculpting, those kind of things. Then it's going to be the number one strength. It would be modeling, so hard surface modeling. This is something that I've started with to begin with. Excuse me the repetition, but this is something that I've been doing for the longest, because I've started with 3ds Max when ZBrush, I'm not even sure, was it probably was in development, but I don't remember it being on the market. And the other subject matter is clothing, and not necessarily clothing design, but clothing in terms of execution of the fabrics, right? So before Marvelous Designer, it was modeling and sculpting, so all the folds would be done manually, and then with Marvelous Designer I would do kind of 70% in Marvelous and then finish up everything in ZBrush. And I do have I would say plenty of tutorials on some of those subjects, especially the clothing, because it's I found it to be the most dynamic, the most kind of interesting in terms of execution, in terms of the subject matter. But I don't have any tutorials, for example, on 3D modeling, because I do find, well, it's a rather straightforward matter. It's about kind of recognizing the rules and how things are working, and just understanding the tools, right, and then executing. So there's plenty of tutorials of this nature out there, and I just thought that I wouldn't be able to share anything new about this. And then there's I do have a rather short compared to my other tutorials, which are like 15 hours long tutorials, all narrated. But I do have one tutorial about organic sculpting. This time around, what I wanted to do, and this is why I say it's controversial, is that I want to talk a little bit about anatomy. And this is not going to be a class about anatomy as such, because I do also believe that there are enough, well, not enough, but there is plenty of tutorials, of masterclasses out there. I would argue that majority of them are not worth your money and time, and I would say that there is, if I would pick, there would be definitely one person I would be completely behind when it comes to teaching anatomy, and that would be Scott Eaton. So if you don't have any exposure to his classes, I would highly recommend you check it out. I think he has the workshops going every half a year, and he's been doing this for more than 10 years. I don't even remember when was the first time I took his class. It definitely was close to 10 years ago, maybe even more. So I would say he is an expert when it comes to anatomy. The other ones, I don't want to be harsh, but I would say that anatomy is a very, very nuanced and rather complicated subject matter. And in my experience, I've seen many times when people would teach anatomy, they would even produce 3D, well, not 3D models, but 3D printed models as atlases, right? That's écorché models for students or for just people to buy and study. And I saw mistakes on those figures. I saw mistakes in those classes, to the point where, you know, bone structure was different in terms, not molecular or chemical structure of the bone, but instead of there being just one bone, there would be two, right? So mistakes of this nature really actually occur. And so I would just say that be cautious if you do want to study anatomy. Be cautious who you choose as your teacher. And as I said, Scott Eaton, I would back him up any day. He is a very, very, very good expert when it comes to anatomy. If you enjoy this content or find it useful, please consider supporting me by buying me a cup of coffee via the link in the description. But anyways, what I wanted to speak here instead, and this is something I also need to mention, that this is not going to be a hands-on kind of a class, right? There's not going to be any sculpting done. There is not going to be any how should I put it, like hands-on practical things in here. This is more like a lecture, and I made it specifically in this format because I do believe in the power of theory just as much as in power of practice. And I do also believe that this subject matter is at the very least something to talk about and something for me to just maybe share. So in those 20 years, or I would say 15 years of doing professional work, concentrating mainly on 3D characters, but there is also some creature sculpting and things like that, but it's primarily has been sculpting of 3D characters, sculpting, modeling, creating. And there is one little thing that I've that I have observed when it comes to this, is that the knowledge of the actual knowledge of anatomy is not, and this is where the controversial part comes in, right? This is not necessary. I do believe that studying subjects is a must, right? If it's whatever it is that we're doing, we need to study it. We need to get really, really, really deep. The reason why I'm contradicting myself here is because we need to be very clear what we are doing, what kind of industry, what kind of medium we are using, right? And then we need to decide what is really important and what isn't. And this is why I call this this lecture series, or just a lecture, a long one, a guide, right? Because I do want to point out that there are some things that are not really that important. If you are, and this is where another things that of importance comes in, if you are a 3D character artist, and if you are not a 3D sculptor, and I need to be very, very clear here that there is a big difference between the two, right? So a digital sculptor or 3D sculptor is a sculptor who uses computer to do the sculpting, right? To do the sculptures, to do the statues, the statuettes, whatever, sculpting work, right? So that would be digital sculptor. 3D character artist, on the other hand, is somebody who does also sculpting, but in a very, very specific way, in such a way that the work that is done is going to be taken by other people, and the work is going to be modified. So in the example of a character, the character will be taken by animators, and a lot of magic is going to take place during the animation, not during the modeling or sculpting stage. All the characters that we do as 3D character artists, they all have basically the same two main positions. Either it's a T pose, right, with the arms stretched out horizontally, or it's an A pose, which with the arms kind of lowered. And that's it. There is nothing more going on other than this when we do 3D character artists. It's all based on the pipeline, right? It's all based on what is going to be taking place afterwards. For a digital sculptor, this is not the case at all. For a digital sculptor, the case is to make a dynamic figure from the get-go. It's not about making a T-pose and then bending, moving, posing, right? It's starting from the pose that is going to be more or less final with some tweaks during the process, right? It's a completely different thing. So this class is definitely not for digital sculptors. This is a class not for concept artists either. This is not a class for technical artists, the ones who are, for example, working in film and who are implementing some muscular rigging systems, right, when the musculature is being simulated, right? So if you want to do that, you will need to understand anatomy really well, because you need to be able to construct the muscles one by one almost, right, and kind of put them in the right position so they can behave the way that they behave in real life. So this is not the class for those kind of artists either. And the way I think about this class is almost like a class by Jamie Oliver, because I'm not going to be going into technicality of the subject matter at hand. I'm not going to be talking about anatomy in such a depth, or in any depth, to be honest. I'm not going to be mentioning any names of the muscles, any bones, nothing of this, right? It's going to be very streamlined, very straightforward information based on the experience that I do have in this industry, based on what I do found to be, what I found to be important, right? So we can focus on what is important instead of spending time and maybe sometimes money on something that might not be necessary at all.